Alright, welcome to this inaugural video in what I hope to be a channel on YouTube to help explain statistics to people, both what they are, what's behind them, and how practically to use them with some software. I'll do software tutorials and that sort of thing. But I want to start by laying a foundation of why we care about any of this stuff, and I'm going to start with science. So why do people make such a big deal about science? Why is everybody all crazy about the so-called STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, and math? Why do jobs in that STEM area pay so well, and so on? Why do we care? Well, to answer that question, the first thing we need to know is what science is. What playground does it belong to? If I were to ask you what a dog is, you might say animal or you might say pet, and those are both perfectly good answers. So what is the category that science belongs in? What should we compare it to? Well, at its base, at its heart, science is a way of understanding the world. And so that puts it in a category with things like religion and philosophy and art. These are all ways of making statements about the world and about reality. We hope that those statements are in some sense true. People argue that religious statements are true or untrue. Philosophy can have good or bad arguments. In art, of course, the statements are not usually literal, right? They're figurative or abstract. But nevertheless, what we would hope to get out of any of these is some measure of truth, something that's true about the world. And the same is true of science. We want science to make statements about the world that help us to understand the world and understand reality. So what makes science special in this regard? What makes it different than religion or philosophy? Well, this is not going to be a 50-hour video, so I'm not going to answer that question. There are entire books written on that subject, but for a 5-minute YouTube video, I'm going to make it simple. Science is different in particular from religion in a couple of important ways. And the first, science is never certain. That doesn't mean scientists are never certain. Just like being a member of a religion doesn't mean that you never sin. Scientists can be perfect a-holes sometimes, and they can act like arrogant fools, but the enterprise of science itself is never certain, whereas most religions claim to have the one true path to heaven or enlightenment or nirvana or whatever it is thereafter. The second way that science is different from religion is that science requires objective evidence. Now, I'll talk about that concept of objectivity in another video, but very briefly, what I mean by objective is not some magical truth with a capital T. I just mean that the value of an observation does not depend on the person who makes the observation. If I say it's 5, you don't have to believe me. You can observe it yourself and see that it's 5. Bob from down the street can also come and observe it and see that it's 5. If I say the line on the left is longer, you don't have to trust me. You can make the observation yourself and verify that the line on the left is longer. And that's all scientists mean when they say science is objective. It doesn't mean scientists don't have values. It doesn't mean that scientists don't use those values to decide what to study or even how to interpret their data. But when they present their data, it's objective. You can look at their data and see exactly what they saw. And you can argue with them about the interpretation and how their biases may have favored one interpretation or another. But the observations themselves are objective. They don't depend on the observer. Anyway, like I said, I'll get into objectivity more in another video. For now, let's just move on. I just wanted to make that point that that's another thing that makes science different from things like religion. Often religion depends on trusting that somebody who says they talk to God or whatever spiritual thing it is. You have to trust that they got the message from that being properly. You can't hear the voice yourself. Okay. So why do so many people care about science? Why not just chuck science and find a good religion that you like? Well, many people do that, but many people have both a religion and a science. They don't see a conflict between the two. And why is that? Why bother with science at all? If you have a religion, why do you also need a science? Well, again, books have been written on that, and I really don't know the answer, so whatever I would say, some philosopher would just rip apart. But I'm going to hazard this guess about why we like science, why science is so popular, why so many people believe in science, and so on. And I'm basing this on my own experience being raised in a religion. I am no longer in that religion, but I was raised in a religion. And I remember that often the most powerful evidence for somebody being a prophet, for example, was a miracle. Something happened that didn't normally happen, and nobody could explain it, and there it was, an amazing thing like walking on water or fire coming out from the sky at just the right time, and everybody was like, yep, that's a prophet. Well, sometime in the 1600s, a few people began to produce miracles, like predicting when the sun would go dark, or curing disease, or making it so that nobody got the disease even when exposed to it, talking over incredible distances instantaneously, even levitating above the earth in heavier than air machines. And these people called themselves, I bet you think I'm about to say scientists, but actually no, most of those miracles were produced by people who called themselves inventors or engineers, and a few doctors. But and a few of those were produced by scientists, predicting when the moon and sun would go dark. That was astronomy. That was really scientists. But for those other miracles, scientists, if they weren't the original producers of the miracles, quickly stepped in and explained the miracles and improved them rapidly and reproduced them on a massive scale. And these miracles were repeatable, meaning that they weren't one-time events that you had to believe a witness if you weren't there when they happened. You don't have to believe that the Wright brothers ever flew. You can go to any airport and watch the miracle of heavier than air flight yourself. You can see for yourself when astronomers say the moon or sun is going to go dark, that it goes dark, exactly when they said it would. This is why people believe in science. Not through any rational argument, not because of any grand revelation given to a believable prophet, but because they can see for themselves repeatable miracles. Of course, many of those things aren't miracles to children who grew up in a world where those things simply happened all the time. If you were born after 1903, you don't know a world where most people insisted that heavier than air flight was impossible. If you were born after the mid-90s, you don't know a world without the internet where knowledge was costly to attain. It cost you at least a trip to the library. And that, I think, is why some people don't believe in science. The miracles don't seem that grand anymore, and they don't give meaning to life. That's another topic for another video. But I'm going to leave it there. This is why I think not everybody, this is why I think so many people think that science is so important, because it seems to produce repeatable miracles.